How did it come about that you ended up devoting your life to other people's problems, and who influenced you?
Well, actually, many people did over the years, but I grew up in a very privileged, wealthy Waco, Texas family. My father was a multimillionaire, and yet I had this feeling that there's something else out there I really need to see before I devote myself entirely to running his business and all of that. And so I took off on, against my parents' wishes, I must say, on a bicycle trip across Europe and hitchhiking around the Middle East and down into Africa. And I began to see people at that time, refugees, for the first time. I didn't even know refugees existed in this world. So I came back to the States, cut my trip a little short. I joined the Peace Corps, spent a couple of years in Malaysia, surrounded by Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists. Fell in love with those people, and that led me then picking up this beautiful woman, Carolyn, my wife. Along the way, we together then went to South Korea, and again, really fell in love with the people. I worked as Peace Corps director in a big part of South Korea for a while. And while there, I heard about Koinonia Farm, Clarence Jordan, these people down in South Georgia, of all places, who were working against the KKK and resisting the hatred and the racism, and reaching out to their black brothers and sisters and making a stand that really appealed to me. So when we came back from South Korea, Carolyn and I moved to Koinonia as volunteers that summer of 1970, and altogether we spent 8 years there. I helped start Habitat for Humanity, building homes for these people who were living in these rat-infested shacks all around.
Then you went on to start your own community. Can you tell us about the genesis of Jubilee Partners?
Well, I was director of Koinonia during the mid-70s. We began to meet over and over again and brainstorm about how to bud off and start a new community somewhere, because we felt that would open up more opportunities. And in the end, 1976, 6 of us volunteered to be the ones to go up and found this new community. And after a long search, we found a beautiful piece of property, rolling hills and meadows and creeks and ponds. It's just so beautiful. In northeast Georgia, 260 acres, but there was not a house, there was not a road, there was not a water system or anything. And so as we worked on those first houses, living in little tents and pop-up campers, it was fun for a week or two, and then the third week it got tougher, and then we began to really wish we could have a hot shower. And then we began, as we worked, listening to our little transistor radios to connect with what we were hearing. It began to get through to us about the boat people of Vietnam at that particular time, the summer of 1979. And we began to really resonate and to understand, wow, refugees, those people really have a rough time. But hey, maybe this is a good place for us to have an orientation center.
So it started with the Vietnamese boat people, and since then you've taken in refugees from many of the conflicts over the last 30 years.
We've hosted, I think it's around 36 different types of refugees from all over the world. We bought a bus and we shuttled back and forth to South Texas. We brought 1,300 Salvadoran, Guatemalans, and a few Hondurans. Through Jubilee, the U.S. rejected them, but we managed to get them legally through the U.S., and the Canadians accepted them.
Because you see these people coming and the difficulties they have acculturating, acclimatizing, readjusting. Mm-hmm. And does that make you want to address these problems closer to the root?
I have led literally dozens of delegations back to the war zones, and we have had reporters and pastors and different people in those delegations going back to understand the roots of the problem more, and then that has led very often to programs relief programs or education programs for the children and all kinds of things to address the problems at the root.
Now, at Jubilee, you work with the different government agencies, and you primarily welcome those who have some legal status to remain, at least temporarily, in this country. Right. Mm-hmm. What about millions of undocumented migrants? What are your views on the laws that make some people, quote, illegal aliens?
Oh, I think we're much too concerned about protecting our money or protecting our advantages and so on, when, in fact, I mean, yes, I guess boundaries have to be there of different types, but if the emphasis were more on how can we, aside from the boundaries and the protection that is necessary in some degree here and there, how can we address what's causing those beautiful kids to be driven away from home and many of them killed in the process as they try to come up through Mexico, for instance, or into Greece from Turkey or wherever it might be. We can do a lot to diminish the problem. The numbers of people, they would rather stay home if they could. They're not fleeing because they want to be like America. That's a distortion. They're fleeing because they're being driven out by violence and danger.
In that connection, is it even helpful to make a distinction between migrants who are fleeing from persecution and those who might be migrating out of economic desperation?
Well, you know, if someone's dying of whatever cause, we need to take that. That's a consideration that needs attention. But it is true increasingly, and here too we have a very obvious role. It is true increasingly that climate change is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the forces that combine to drive people away from home. When deserts just spread and oases dry up and people are fighting over shrinking water sources and food and so on, that obviously has political implications too.
So do the refugees from all these different parts of the world who live together at Jubilee, do they get along?
I've got this wonderful little second-story porch where I go out no matter how cold it is, and I've made a little place where I can build a little campfire, a little fire there, and I sit and drink a cup of coffee at sunrise, and the children are out there over and over again. I'll spot kids out there from Burma, from the Congo, from Central America, our own kids from North America, and out there playing with each other. And this is how I hope the whole world can someday become.
Most of the people you offer hospitality to are keen to move on as soon as they're able. And I know many of your volunteers also are there for a season. Mm-hmm. So how do you maintain continuity with this turnover, and how does that affect your community life together? Well,
we have rituals, I guess some might call them. We do things like having lunch together every day with about a 30-minute time of devotions, of scripture reading, or someone talking about a book they've just read that's really meaningful, and singing a song and that sort of thing daily. We have, for those who choose to come to it, we have 30 minutes of silent prayer before the workday starts each morning in our library. We have worship services on Sunday evening to which the refugees are welcome to come.
So your refugees are welcome to join your services regardless of their own religion?
Yes, of course, yeah. And if they choose, for instance, when we have Muslim refugees there, if they choose to go to their mosque, there is a mosque in Athens, pardon me, in Athens, about 20 miles away from us. Well, we put them in the car and take them to the mosque on Friday and whatever. The irony is that many of the Muslims who've lived at Jubilee, about 400 of them, in fact, from Bosnia, were fleeing from Christian persecutors. We don't hear that side of it very much in this country, but it was Christians who were killing them, torturing them. In one case, a man came to us with scars all over his chest, crosses, and he said a man stood there and carved those crosses on my chest with a knife and said, "I'm converting you to a Christian." And he said, "Here at Jubilee, I see this is a different thing. This is something that I like. This is a different kind of Christianity." And one of those Muslims said, "I feel that I have actually seen Jesus here."
So what would you say has been the highlight of your 30, 40 years of living in community?
The richest part of being at Jubilee is the reality of face-to-face relationships, not only with the refugees who are coming to us out of war zones around the world, but with so many people, young, old, all ages, who come to us from around the United States. Right now we have volunteers from 4 different countries, from Switzerland, Germany, and France, as well as the United States. Getting to know these people well, hearing their spiritual backgrounds, their family struggles, falling in love with more and more people.
And what has been the hardest? I mean, what have been the challenges to living in community?
Well, we get tired sometime. You know, after all, it's a small community, and at times we're practically outnumbered by just the refugees themselves. In addition to that, we have anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 visitors a year that come through, and there are 20 adults there who live there year-round. We could easily work too hard. We have to pace ourselves. I try to walk 3 or 4 miles a day, and I attend almost every morning the prayer time and work in the worship time, the quiet time. I try to mix those kinds of healing, celebrating, appreciating God's world around us activities with sometimes the more routine and even difficult and even semi-monotonous kinds of things that have to be done too. I take my turn on dishes and cooking and all the rest just like everyone else. And somehow it all flows together, and we've got enough people there who are then ready to play a good game of soccer, or if it's cold outside, Scrabble or something, board games indoors. And there's laughter, there's music, there are guitars, there's a cello, there's piano, and it's a rich life. You know, I wouldn't trade it for $500,000 a year, you know, and be a millionaire. Forget it. I had that option as a teenager and a young guy, and I'm glad I chose this instead.